our first panelist for the day, Dr. Romesh Wadhwani. May we have you on stage, please? May I invite Professor Ramgopal Rao, Director IIT, to join the panel. Professor Rao is currently the Director of IIT Delhi. Before joining IIT Delhi as a Director in April 2006, Dr. Rao served as P.K. Kellar Chair Professor in Nanotechnology in the Department of Electrical Engineering as Chief Investigator for the Center of Excellence in Nanoelectronics. He is an inventor, 37 patents and patent applications. Thank you, Professor Rao. May I invite Mr. G.V. Ravishankar, MD, Sequoia Capital, on stage to join the panel, please. G.V. Ravishankar, also former McKinsey executive, where he advised senior management of top Indian companies on issues such as business building, channel management, and leadership development. May I invite to join the panel Kunal Upadhyay, CEO at Center for Innovation, Incubation, and Entrepreneurship. Kunal serves as the CEO of Center for Innovation, Incubation, and Entrepreneurship. He is an officer at Infuse Ventures. Welcome, Kunal. May I invite Sanjeev Bikhchandani on stage, please? Sanjeev needs no introduction. He is the Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of Naukri.com, India's leading career portal, and it gets over 100 million page views a month. To have a conversation and engage them in conversation is Ms. Lakshmi Pratury. May I invite her on stage, please? Lakshmi brought TED to India in 2009. In 2009, when the first TED India conference was held in Mysore, and in December 2010, she curated and hosted the first Inc. conference in association with TED. As a social entrepreneur, Lakshmi was a leading force at the American India Foundation, where she was a part of the management team that raised over $30 million in 5 years to channel towards development activities in India. Lakshmi will be moderating the show. Thank you so much.
The only purpose of our being here is to increase the average age in this room. Apart from that, I don't know how much wisdom we are going to have today. So I just want to start with, before asking them, I want to start with a very quick story of, in Mahabharata, when we are kids, they tell us this story. I think all of us heard this story of Arjuna shooting the bird. How many of you heard this story? Okay. So the thing goes, every student comes, what do you see? I see the bird, I see the body, I see everything. Nobody can shoot it. Arjuna comes and he says, I can see the eye. And the teacher says, shoot. He shoots, he gets the bird. So what do they teach you in school? Focus. Focus on the one thing, that's what makes you famous. What they do not tell you is that they also taught Arjuna how to sing, how to dance, how to write, how to do so many other things. So when they had to be in hiding, he could actually teach dance. So the thing I want to bring together in the conversation today is that we talk about focus, we talk about finding the one thing that you love and do that. But I think what's most important is to have an interdisciplinary approach to life. So we have a group of people here. Each of them is going to bring a different perspective of what's needed or what we need to think of for entrepreneurship. So it's truly a delight. The only problem is going to be if you sit down, I can't get up. So just excuse me if I'm ungracious in my sitting and getting up. So I thought that I will start with Dr. Rao. One of the things is that I always believe that creativity or support or inspiration should start when you're young. So as you are, I think of all the people, you get them youngest in their teens in IIT. So what are the kind of things you feel you're doing or one ought to do to have that sense of creativity in individuals at a younger age?
It's a good point. In fact, I should tell you, IITs are going through a major transformation now. That is, I think that transformation began maybe at least 5 to 7 years ago. And for example, if you look at the journey of IITs, the initial people like Romesh Wadhwani, the Wadhwani brothers, I think, there was a generation where they stayed back in India, some of them. Then there was the second generation where the entire class used to go abroad. None stayed back in India. Then the third generation, which is in the last 10, 15 years, if I look at IIT Bombay and IIT Delhi, the two institutes which I am very well aware of, because I spent 22 years at IIT Bombay and then 2 years at IIT Delhi. And I think in the last 5 to 7 years, many students are actually staying back in India. Only about 5% of our students are going abroad. That is the case in the last 5-7 years. But then when they were staying back, they were doing MBAs and starting these e-commerce companies and things like that. But now in the last 3 to 4 years, I see a major rise in this startup kind of a culture. At both IIT Bombay and IIT Delhi, our surveys show that 1 in 4 students wants to start a company. They're not even sitting for placements. At IIT Delhi, for example, this year, almost like more than 100 students said we are starting something and we don't want placements. I think this is something that has begun now, and it all started with the success of e-commerce companies. In fact, I should also tell you, even I did not know that until I came to Delhi. Half the billionaires produced out of the IIT system, one of them is here, of course. Half the billionaires produced out of the IIT system, half of them are from IIT Delhi alone. Meaning among the total billionaires out of the IIT system, half are from IIT Delhi alone. We were actually trying to see, what is it that makes so many people from Delhi, actually become entrepreneurs. We figured out that, sometimes it's the family background. Most of them happen to be Agarwals, Guptas, and Bansals kind of a thing. I think which is good. That is all in their
it's
DNA.
The annual rendezvous.
So that is one thing. So we are looking at now how can we encourage the startup part on the campus. What is that we can do as an institute, to help nurture that kind of a talent. And students also need to realize that the e-commerce kind of an era is over. Now it is all time for deep tech kind of startups. And also coming from IITs, I would also like that they move up the value chain and start looking at some technology intensive kind of companies. So we are taking many measures now in order to encourage the deep tech kind of startups on the campus. There are many measures that we are looking at. For example, one of the things we are starting now in the next 3 months is we call it a PhD incubator. The PhD stands for a platform for harnessing technology development kind of an activity. What we are saying is IITs are also producing large number of PhDs now. IIT Bombay and IIT Delhi every year graduate more than 300 PhDs. And none of them, hardly any really get into entrepreneurship or incubation kind of activities. They all get their PhD degrees and go abroad or took up a academic position, and the faculty member also moves on. So what we are saying is at IIT Delhi we are creating an incubator for them where we will take about 50 such PhD students. We have worked on a deep technology kind of a problem, and we provide them all the facilities of IIT for 3 years. We provide them a fellowship, we provide them accommodation. In the 3 years, we will mentor them through our alumni. We have a large number of alumni, and see if any of them can start companies. Can their technologies become startups eventually? And then, with the support system that we will provide, because they will require very high-end facilities, which will be very difficult for them to, acquire outside the system. So that is something that we are doing now. That PhD incubator process is where, a lot of emphasis we are putting on. That's one thing. And also connecting students to the real problems. In IIT system, they've all been disconnected from the society for almost like 3 years before they enter IIT. They go through all this coaching and all of that. They come to IIT, they again go through the whole rigor, and they never had time to even know what the problems in the society are. So at IIT Delhi, we are starting a program, what we call the immersion programs, where we are sending every year students to hospitals, let them go and work with doctors, because we are now tied up with the All India Institute of Medical Sciences. We are saying, can our students go and be in an operation theater when a surgery is being performed, just observe how the surgeries are done, see what kinds of technologies they can actually incorporate into that. When an engineer looks at it, either they will faint or they will look at that as a problem and find a solution. So that is one thing that we are starting with All India Institute of Medical Sciences, which we have already started, but we are scaling it up. We are also going to send this summer, we will be sending at least 100 students from IIT Delhi to villages. I want them to go and live with a farmer and see how farming is done. Indian farming agriculture sector has hardly seen any technologies. When they go and look at how farming is done, I'm sure they will come back with lots of interesting ideas. Even look at, what sort of administration system that exists in the villages, what sort of requirements they have. That is one thing that we are doing. Send them to industries, send them to places where the real problems are. And then when they come back, they can start to develop solutions for that. This immersion program, we are actually, going in a big way at IIT Delhi. The third thing we are doing is the faculty startups. Now, my target is at least there are 500 faculty. I want 1 in 10 faculty members to start a company. Today, it exists. Today, there are at least 10 startups which are started by faculty, which are doing well along with the students. But we want that at least 50 startups by the faculty, because these are the people who have worked on a particular technology for a period of time. And if they look at entrepreneurship as an option, I'm sure a lot of great things can happen. So these are some of the initiatives which we have taken, and we are also building, tech parks now on the campus. There are 3 tech parks coming up so that industries can come and work with the students and faculty. We are building a big incubator now for that. We are building central research facilities which can be accessed by the technology companies. These are some of the initiatives. I think that has to be the future. IIT students need to become job creators. And if all of them just look for jobs, it's not a scalable model. India needs 10 million jobs to be created every year. And if IIT students don't do that in those technology kind of space, I think the country doesn't have a future.
Great. So that leads us naturally to an entrepreneur, Sanjeev, is that, the journey is great at the end of it. We know your success, etc. But I'd like you to talk about the tough part of it. Everybody here is IIT Bombay, IIT Delhi. I'm an IIT Bombay dropout, and I started being an entrepreneur at 40, and I'm still trying to figure out what I'm doing. And I would like you to talk about what was the tough part of being an entrepreneur, and how did you get over it?
So, can you hear me? Yeah. So, look, the problem is that everybody writes about the successes.
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody writes about the guys who made it. Very few people write about the guys who dropped out, the guys who couldn't make it. The truth is that, look, many startups will fail, and entrepreneurship is Darwinian, okay? It is survival of the fittest. Yet people do it. Because when they're going through it, they realize, they see their friends going through it. I had so many, I had at least 4 or 5 of my contemporaries who started out alongside me. Only one remains, okay, an entrepreneur. Rest went back to jobs, and that's fine. So, look, there will be tough times. Most often, it'll be shortage of capital. Most often, it'll be, hey, I can't take a salary myself. Most often, it'll be poor infrastructure because I can't afford better infrastructure. It might be, rejection when you go to, try to make sales calls. Client after client will not buy your product. And you got to pick yourself up each time and go back again and again. Retool, rethink, retinker. And yes, so I remember, in 2001 or 2000, we had just raised the Series A. Market melted down. Post that, there was a dot-com meltdown, then telecom meltdown, and then 9/11 happened, right? And we had about 16 months of money left, no hope of a next round of funding, and our salary bill was 4 times our revenue. Yeah, and we were frugal. We were really frugal. We were in this really cheap office in the backlands of Noida among rubber and chemical factories. We had not spent a lot of money, but yet our salary bill was, 4 times our revenue. And basically, sales were not happening, or not happening the way they would. So you go through these tough times, and you got to guts it out. I think there's a lot of responsibility on the entrepreneur then to really lead the company, lead the people, still, ensure people are committed and people stay. So you got to be this magnet for talent who can go out and do it, and you got to lead from the front.
So that leads me to actually Ravi, you come from Sequoia. You actually have some legendary venture capitalists in your as your heritage. Whether it is Don Valentine or Mike Moritz. I mean, these are like companies like Cisco and Apple and blah blah. They roll off the tongues in Silicon Valley. And here also you've had quite a few successful. I mean, in the process, whether it's Zomato or Practo, Byju's, you're investing in all those. What do you think are the characteristics of a great VC? I mean, to be the one that, whether the Arthur Rocks or the Don Valentines of the world, what do you think are the characteristics of a great VC? What would you like to be?
I'd certainly like to be one of them that you named. Still early in my career here and still
Actually,
learning to
so
do this
early,
job.
if you didn't walk up on stage, I would have thought you were one of the students.
Right. No, much older than that actually. I think, I've had the benefit of watching Mike Moderat's, Doug Leone, some of my partners in the US, and a few things it comes down to. It is it's conviction on what you're seeing as either the entrepreneur or the market opportunity, the courage to back them, and the willingness to stay the course. Because like Sanjeev said, there is absolutely no straight one rocket company. We've always heard of companies, even the very best of them, that have gotten bought for billions of dollars, and when we debrief, and talk about the company and the evolution, it's never a straight line. So there is a lot to do with kind of staying the course, and having the conviction and the courage to stay the course, and backing the passion of the entrepreneur and kind of supporting them through the journey. So I think it's for people that have done it long enough, and our business is one of those where you learn through cycles over a long period of time. There's a lot of luck, clearly, but I think the real learning happens as you see the entire journey of these companies, and you realize it's really just many times you doubt yourselves about having made the wrong choice. And it's in those times you got to go back and look at the basics of saying, hey, why did we do this? And if some of those assumptions are still true, then you want to stay the course and support the entrepreneur. So I think it really comes down to some of those basic characteristics. And second thing I would say is there is a lot of behavioral economics at play. We end up either being too attached to these companies, not really seeing it. So the best investors have also learned how to pull the plug on things that aren't working, right? So knowing when to carry on and when to stop, because you're not doing a service to the entrepreneur by not telling them if they are hunting in the wrong neighborhood or don't have something that's going to really make them really big. So I think those would be some characteristics, I think.
Kunal, I'd like to ask the next question to you of, we've been talking about entrepreneurship a lot, and I think you have some interesting perspectives on that of, is entrepreneurship for everyone? So if everyone becomes an entrepreneur, who works for them? So, what are your perspectives on the other side of entrepreneurship?
So definitely not everyone is meant to be an entrepreneur, but there's of course theory that entrepreneurs are not necessarily born. They can be made. There's the theory of effectuation, etc., which well proven that you can actually develop methodologies, or you can develop mechanisms to actually inculcate your entrepreneurial skills much better. But at the same time, I think clearly over the last decade or so, entrepreneurship in the country has boomed. We've seen peaks. A couple of years back, it's come down. There's been a little bit of correction in the last couple of years. I think what is very critical is for entrepreneurs to actually empathize with the customer, which is the point that Mr. Wadhwani was making earlier in the day as well. It's the single most important ingredient to success. You ought to be able to have the pulse of the customer, understand what their needs are, and then create solutions catering to those needs, which not every entrepreneur is able to do, or aspiring entrepreneur is able to do as they graduate out of their college. So it's important that aspiring entrepreneurs be realistic. They spend enough time immersing themselves in the problems, trying to understand those problems, and also very importantly, picking up the right markets that they want to focus on. There's a very interesting saying by one of the founders of Benchmark Capital, which goes like, a great team, if you put it in a lousy market, the market wins. You put an average team in a great market, the market still wins. You may still succeed. And if you put a great team in a great market, that's where the magic happens. So it's very important for the entrepreneurs to actually identify the best markets, and that ability to identify the best markets is not going to come naturally to them. If they go and are immersed in the actual market for long enough to get a pulse of it, that's when they'll be able to identify it. And I think the point that Professor Rao was making, the kids need to actually go out in the field, get a sense of what the real needs are, That's when they'll be able to create the right kind of ventures. Otherwise, I mean, we've seen the last few years wherein too many Me Too ventures have also been created. Very little success, many of them have met. This is when it comes to startups, but I think entrepreneurship is beyond startups. I mean, we should also not forget the SMEs. We should also not forget the more of services kind of startups. We believe that, I personally believe that India is a huge country. Not every enterprise needs to see itself as a startup, or not every new enterprise needs to see it as a startup. There are a lot of local problems that need to be created and solved, that need to be solved. I think the entrepreneurs need to identify these local problems as well and try to focus on solving those problems. And I mean, just to give you a simple example, India still doesn't have a national plumbing brand. India still doesn't have a national carpentry brand. So maybe there's an opportunity for someone to create a franchisee-based model instead of the regular models that we've been talking about to actually solve those problems. And in the process, a lot of job creation will automatically happen. They may not be traditional startups, but those kind of opportunities I think entrepreneurs need to look at rather than just blindly following what others are doing and trying to replicate that.
So Ramesh, now we are with you. We've heard all about your home, your wealth, we've heard about your passion, we know your plan. I want you to talk something very personal. I asked this before also. For everyone to succeed, no matter what, someone has played a role to bring us here. And I really would like you to talk about your parents. And I've said this, both Romesh and his brother are superbly successful entrepreneurs. So I asked him earlier that what is it that makes you what you are? And I think, and most of you know, Romesh had polio when he was about 2 years old. And I would like you to tell the story of how your father taught you perseverance, not just about getting into the school. What happened after you went to the school and how he taught you the perseverance which makes you who you are today?
As we've learned today from you and from me, one of the keys to being a successful entrepreneur is to never give up. Now, somewhere in the journey of our lives, we learn lessons that strengthen that resolve that when faced with obstacles, we're not going to give up. In my case, I had an unusual obstacle that thankfully no one else in this room has, which is that I had polio at age 2. And when faced with that kind of crisis in a family, parents can choose to do a variety of things. They can choose to tough it out and treat the kid as if he's normal and make the kid feel normal, and then the kid goes on to achieve whatever he can. Or they can choose to shelter the kid and say, you know what, you should not really aspire to that much because of this particular handicap that you face. To the great credit of my parents, both my father and my mother, they took the first route. They just treated it like, okay, it's a problem. It's not such a big deal that we can't deal with it. At no point in my growing up years did they ever make me feel like I should aspire to less. As an example, when I was going to IIT Bombay, my parents were all for it. The problem was not with me, and the problem was not with my parents. It was not with the admissions committee at IIT Bombay. It was with the chief medical officer of IIT Bombay. So I get through the JEE exam. I get admitted to IIT Bombay. I think all of you know that there's a physical that the doctor performs. The doctor performs my physical. He says, I'm going to advise the director not to admit you. And so obviously I was shocked. I asked, he said, look, I don't think you'll be able to take the rigor of all the walking on campus. Now, fortunately, this was a somewhat overweight doctor. So I challenged him. I said, let's take a walk around the campus, and whoever falls first wins. So if you, Mr. Chief Medical Officer, are huffing and puffing and can't go any further, you let me in. And if I'm huffing and puffing and I can't go any further, then you can do what you like. He looked at me and he thought about it. He didn't want to go walking on the campus. He said, I'm letting you in. So that's the way it goes sometimes, you know, and you can only do that if you have the self-confidence that your parents have given you. So I would say this is the main thing.
So we are almost at the end of the evening. I just would like to end by each of you saying very quickly, what would you like to see happen in India in terms of entrepreneurship? What would you like to see India become? How can we become innovative even more than we've been? So quickly tell me, what would you like to see happen here, and what can the entrepreneurs, the young people can play a role in it?
I'll go first.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see a very large number of startups, A, be founded, and B, succeed. Now, the truth is that it's a virtuous circle. The more startups succeed, the more people are inspired to take up entrepreneurship. So it's really important for organizations like NEM not just to foster the founding of startups, but also continuous mentoring so that more and more succeed. So I think creating successful startups is really important.
I think I'd love to see the country produce more non-conformists, mavericks, if you may, not necessarily at later stages in their life, but as kids. The kids need to start thinking out of the box. It's beginning to happen, but I think the country has a long way to go. It's only going to happen in their younger age as kids grow. I mean, they kind of set themselves into a certain mindset and conformism. I think if the primary education and secondary education in the country can change significantly, wherein problem solving becomes the single most critical part of teaching versus kind of mugging up textbooks, I think that'll be a significant change for the country.
Since I myself am co-founder of 2 deep tech kind of startups. I have a company which is producing, explosive detectors, another one producing agricultural sensor products. I think, I interact with so many students on the campus. My worry is students, think everything has to be just fun and easy. I think, we are producing a generation where everybody thinks everything should be fun and everything should be easy. I think life doesn't work that way. I think that is the mindset at IIT Delhi. Just yesterday we had Jyoti Bansal, who is our latest billionaire, and he had a 1-hour chat with the students. It took him 10 years to understand what that problem was, and for that he had to work with three startups before he could even understand the problem. I think I keep telling the students, just with a BTech degree, you cannot really do much. And I also don't believe in, of course, there is a space for some startups for school dropouts and college dropouts. But I think we need to now get into the deep tech kind of startups, and IITs need to play a role. And for that, unfortunately, the ecosystem in the country is also not there currently. The scaling of technology products is a big challenge, and even the VC funding is very limited. I think if some of these problems through government and to support of philanthropists and VCs and angel investors, if that can be put together, there is a lot of hidden talent in IIT system now, which can produce some great technologies for the future.
So I look at the problem through 2 lenses. The lens of the entrepreneur, because that's what I am. I'm fundamentally, a lifelong serial entrepreneur. And then through the lens of the Indian economy and the impact that entrepreneurship needs to play, have on the job creation and economic development. So when I look at it that way, I feel that there are 2 axes and we need to make both work simultaneously. On one axis, we need more startups. Again, if you define a startup as a company that is registered, has some IP, ideally has a product, has customers or is very close to having a customer. Only 750 startups happened last year. So we can sit here and talk about all the wonderful work we're doing. We can see some fantastic, great, inspiring success stories. But in the end, it's only 750 in a country of 1.3 billion. So how do we scale that up by 10x? Not just by having 10,000 people start self-employed little practices of 1 and 2 people each, but true startups using deep tech or services companies or plumbing supplies companies or plumbing manufacturers. So that's one axis. On the other axis, I would love to see a scenario where if you take startups and you put them into 4 buckets, maybe 25% of the startups get to only 10 employees. Maybe another 25% of the startups get to 50 employees. Maybe another 25% of the startups get to 250 employees, and then the other 25% get to 1,000 employees. That will not only have a massive impact on wealth creation for the entrepreneur and for all the people around him or her, but for the national economy. I mean, how many startups does it take to produce a huge impact on India if each startup only has 5 employees or 10 employees? We can never produce that many startups. So we need to focus about how we help entrepreneurs scale. Every entrepreneur is not equal. Some have the potential and the leadership and the, develop the managerial skills to actually be able to scale to 1,000, and others can't. So I think we need to provide sort of personalized journeys and personalized support programs for entrepreneurs to take them as far as they can be taken. And I think we're a long way from that. I think the growth potential of the existing entrepreneurs we have is probably only being 10% or 20% exercised. So I'd love to see a whole set of programs, some of which are government-sponsored, some of which are in the institutions like the IITs, some of which are through foundations like ours, where we are growing scale on one side and growing the number of startups on the other side, and everyone benefits.
So I think a lot of fantastic points have been made, and I want to take a different angle to this. I'd like to see a lot of self-belief in the younger generation, a belief that we are we are not second to anyone, that we have the ability to be global leaders when we build something. I think there's this concept of an ovarian lottery that I think Mr. Buffet or Mr. Munger talks about, which is if you are born in the US, you already got a lottery win because you're in a market which is a great market, etc., etc. And I like to think that people who are either millennials or born around late 90s or early 2000s have that lottery today when you're born in India, because we have this tremendous opportunity ahead of us, decades of growth ahead of us, which is not available in every market. All we have to do is believe that we can do this and kind of build global companies.
Great. So as a wrap up, as you know, I'd like to leave you with a story. When I was in US, I went to somebody and said, I want you to be my mentor. Like, I need somebody to tell me what to do. So he made me sit down and he told me this story. He said, it's a story of a little girl who goes to the zoo and she sees a big elephant. The elephant is tied to a rope, but is very thin, to a pole that's very thin. But the elephant looks very sad. And she asked the zookeeper, why is the elephant sad? The zookeeper says, look at the forest out there. That's where the elephant wants to go. And the little girl says, wait a minute. All it takes is for the elephant to move its head and it'll be out there. The rope is not keeping it back. Why is it staying? The guy says, when the elephant came, it was very small. The rope was very thick. And the fence was very high. So it tried for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, and gave up, thinking that it can never get out. The elephant doesn't know how big it has become and how powerful it has become. And all it takes for it to move its head once and it'll be out there. And to me, in the last 7 years I spent in India working with the people here, I am always reminded of this elephant. I meet people, I say, my God, what amazing stories, how great you're doing. But somehow, as you're saying, we are not seeing our own power. Because to me, really, the dream is, hopefully we can see our own power and be the best we can be out there. And the other thing I also realized is that you may not always get the credit for what you do. And it doesn't matter as long as the whole crowd moves forward. So I want to leave you with one thought. I'm at INC and we have a saying that life ought not to be measured by the number of breaths we take, but by the number of moments that take our breath away. If that's true, each of you here, each of the people on the stage, I think we should be greedy about creating magical moments out there and nothing else, and everything else will follow. So in all this our rush of valuations and all these things, let's not forget humanity. Let's not forget the magic. Let's not forget the magical moments we need to create. So great thanks to all of you for being here, and to all the students who are already out partying. I don't blame them. And really, really, it's a huge honor to be here, to be part of this conversation. And here is to all the billionaires of moments. Thank you.